still calculating this whiplash of weather we've had this year. As far as 100s, most ever for downtown Sacramento, totaling 44. For Stockton, the most ever at 40. Sacramento Executive, 29. That's going to rank 6th. And for Modesto, 28, ranking 7th. All of this falling in line with what was a historic September. Warm overnight lows, warm afternoon highs. We had the warmest overnight lows on record for Sacramento, Stockton, and Modesto in the 70s to near 80, and the hottest ever September temperatures from 112 to 116. In fact, that 116-degree temperature for downtown Sacramento, the hottest ever, breaking our 1925 July 17th record. So definitely some hot weather here as we wrapped up the month of September. As we head into the next couple of months, our average temperatures tend to go down. We'll see occasional bumps of heat in there, but overall cooling conditions and also our rain averages start to go up. The rainiest time of the year, December, January, and February. And we're really going to need every drop of this, especially when we take a look at the cumulative drought impacts here. The driest 3 years on record, starting back in the water year of 2020. Now, Janine Jones from the Department of Water Resources says, though, our water supplies aren't the same across the board, though.
California's large urban water agencies actually do a good job of providing reliable water supplies. Almost all of the supply shortage problems, the urgent problems that we see with water systems, are with small water systems, especially those in rural areas, and especially those that rely on fractured rock groundwater, which is an unreliable source during droughts.
Taking a look at what that groundwater looks like on a map. This is basically the water underneath our feet. We don't see it unless it's pumped up through a well, and then we can bring it to the surface. But you can see across the board here our hydrological drought as we break this up into categories here. It's pretty much red throughout the entire state. So we're basically in that drought category for our groundwater situation. Now, conversely, we had a decent monsoon season and some late season showers. And so when we take a look at some of the other impacts, say the agricultural impacts, our soil moisture is doing okay at this point in the season. Also, for our ecological drought situation with the energy release component, that basically says if soil moisture is a little bit higher, our fuel is a little bit more moist, and that reduces that fire risk. And we're on the wetter side of things for that particular category of drought. But when we look at our snow drought, we're seeing a lot of red dots up here throughout the Sierra. So once again, we're in that drought category. Snow water equivalent is if we were to take the entire snowpack, melt it down, move it into our rivers, our creeks, our streams, and of course our reservoirs, how much of that would actually result in water. And unfortunately for Shasta and Oroville, we just didn't have a whole lot. So we already started off with big deficits heading into the dry part of the year. These numbers typically go down pretty low at this point in the season. We're coming off of months of basically no water coming in from the sky as that rain shuts off pretty much in the early part of June. So Shasta, Oroville, and Folsom all at about 33 to 35% full right now, sitting at 60 to 70% of average. Now, as we take a look at New Melones, we're only at 40% of average, 26% full right now. Don Pedro, not looking terrible, 76% of average, 52% full right now. Our rainfall totals, they're at 0 because we just reset that rain gauge for our water year. Starts up on October 1st, and then it will take us all the way through the wet part of the year into next year on September 30th. So we have some deficits right now, but again, it's really not that big of a deal because our rainy part of the year hasn't really started to ramp up. That'll be November through pretty much March of next year. How did this last one shape up? Remember that huge atmospheric river that we got at the end of October last year? It was an AR5, exceptional category. We had some historic rainfall come on through. And then pretty much that tap went dry in November. Back to some wet conditions in December, and then record dryness hit again. January, February, and March. Now, our peak snowpack typically hits right in between March and April. After that, if we're not seeing a whole lot of snow, we're in dire straits because our water is at its highest demand from April all the way through September, when we typically have our driest part of the year. I mentioned earlier that we had a fairly decent monsoon season, and that gave us some surface moisture moving in for the soil moisture, some agricultural impacts that were advantageous for us there. But then that record heat again hit in September. Now we're resetting the water year, and so it's all about what is ahead. We made some good strides given that we had those huge atmospheric rivers come through in October and December. So when we look at where we ended last year's water year compared to this year's water year, it looks a little bit better. But I do want to go back to that hydrological situation, the groundwater, because Janine is basically saying we need to do a lot to get us back to where we should be.
We have to think about adapting some of our backbone infrastructure so that we can take these high flows when they become available on a very intermittent basis in big storms and make better use of them, such as new infrastructure needed for groundwater recharge projects.
In fact, one of the headlines that we're seeing is the Sacramento Valley is now starting to sink. This is called land subsidence, and we've been seeing this for years throughout the San Joaquin Valley, especially the Central Valley towards Fresno and Bakersfield. But now, as we zoom in a little bit closer, we're actually starting to see some of this appearing in parts of Colusa and Yolo counties near Arbuckle, all the way in through Davis, just off to the west of Sacramento. Some of the impacts, now you can see here our picture with Michelle Sneed from USGS, that in 1988, this is where the ground was. By 2016, this is where the ground has sunk in parts of the Central Valley. So again, some of the impacts, water quality decline. So when we pump that to the surface, it's actually not as great as quality as if we were to keep that groundwater intact. Salinity, we get that seawater intrusion because we've got a bit of inconsistencies with the ground level. So we start to see a bit more of that push inland because gravity is going to take it inland. Also our conveyance system, how we move water through the state. The delivery is partially damaged. And again, that's going to take some work to get that back up where it needs to be. What will help is some water so that we have more surface water and we don't have to pump as much groundwater. But right now we're in a La Nina pattern. What does that mean for us? Well, we've got the cool water in the equatorial Pacific, and traditionally that means a wetter Pacific Northwest and can mean a wetter Northern California, a drier Southern California, and we all share the same water. So unfortunately, it's not looking too good at this point in the forecast models. We take a look at a couple of different models. This is the North American Multi-Model Ensemble, and this is in October where we're calling for some dry conditions. By November, a little bit more moisture starts to move our way, and then December, we are back to the dry conditions. But we got a couple of different models that we look at. This is another one, the European model, and it's looking a little bit more wet throughout the entire state for the month of November. Comparatively, though, overall, it's looking fairly dry heading into our rainy part of the year.